What's up everybody? It's Eric from MAPerformance. I'm sitting in the Dreams to Reality car for Jason Everett's 1992 Mitsubishi Galant VR4. In this episode, we're going to be running through all the little steps and all the big steps that it took to get this car to the point where it's at. So stay tuned for the end of the episode. We're going to hopefully be getting this car started for the first time in a very long time, which is huge. I can only imagine what Jason would feel like seeing this thing running again. So we put a ton of work in to get this car from the roller that we had it in as episode 3 to the state that it's at right now. To start, had the transmission completely gone through by jacks. The engine got all brand new gaskets supplied by White Bear Mitsubishi, and we paired those together with the comp twin disc clutch. From there, we timed it, installed it into the engine bay, started buttoning it up, putting on the turbo kit, the intake manifold, installing the fuel system, bleeding everything from the clutch line to the brake lines, purging the fuel system, making sure everything was operational and there wasn't any leaks. We spent a lot of time on the wiring harness, making sure that it was ready just to plug in, with some additions of the dual map switch feature and the boost controller setup. And we put in a custom thermo switch fan controller, just to make sure that everything that we're doing to the car is easy to work on, understanding that the person that was going to be working on this, we want it to be as easy as possible while also being 100% functional. So with that being said, going forward, when we installed everything, a lot of thought was put into how we're doing it. Is it easy enough to get to where it won't be a hassle down the road if anybody does have to put time into it? I think that we did a really good job. So to monitor the engine vitals, AEM hooked us up with their X-line gauges. So we have an air-fuel ratio gauge, an oil pressure gauge, and a boost pressure gauge, so that while we're driving it and having it on the rollers, we can really visually see what the engine's doing and make sure that it's operating properly. For the clutch, Competition Clutch hooked us up with their twin disc series clutch. The reason we went with the twin disc was because this car is built and suited to make around 600 horsepower, and on a standard style clutch, it just won't hold the power, and if it does, it won't hold it for a long time. So a twin disc is really the go-to to make sure that this thing doesn't slip. So when we first got the car and we pulled the engine and transmission out, upon inspection we found that the transmission shifter housing was actually damaged, and we deemed it that it would not work. So we hit up our friends at Jack's. They did a top-notch job putting it all back together and making sure that it was in a new like condition when they sent it back to us. So one of our sponsors is Radium Engineering, and they sent us their twin vented -10 catch can setup. We fabricated a plate to make it fit where we wanted it to in the engine bay, and we welded -10 alloy fittings onto the valve cover with black nylon -10 hoses going to it. And then they also sent us their quick drain kit. So that's installed as well for easy draining of the catch can after prolonged driving. One of the big aspects of this car that Jason designed himself is his full 3-piece billet intake manifold. 1G style runners that bolt to a velocity stack plate that bolts to the plenum. And they're all O-ring fitted for absolute sealing. When he built it, he had a lot of time into it. I think he did three or four different alterations to the plenum itself until he got it to a state where he was satisfied with. Very well designed. The craftsmanship that went into it is, I would say, outstanding. For Jason's car, I faced a lot of challenging hurdles that I had to overcome in the last 2 weeks. First time we put fuel in it, we had an issue with the tank. Had to pull that out, fix it, put it back in, pressure test it, make sure it was all good. Once that passed, the rack and pinion decided to go. Took everything out, replaced the rack, replaced the power steering pump. Pretty much anything that was still factory on the car that we hadn't replaced, got replaced. Getting the wiring harness to work how I wanted it to, that took a lot of research. There was a lot of work that was already done to the wiring harness that we had to tweak to make work with the new setup. Some headlight issues, some brake light issues, and Once we got that all resolved, it doesn't leak and everything works. I call that a victory. So I have a lot of my own time invested into this car. When I first started at MAP, Jason's car parked right next to where I parked my car, since they were both project cars still. Me and a few other people sat around yesterday and kind of just like stared at this thing and realized kind of how far it's come from when I first saw it. There's a lot of things that I did on this car that I'm gonna go back through and do on my car. It's a huge learning curve, a lot of personal milestones I met with building this, and I really hope that everybody gets to experience this car, enjoys it to its full extent, how Jason would have driven it. I'm really proud of this car. The entire time building it, I tried to look at it from Jason's perspective, making sure everything was clean, everything looks seamless, and also make sure it looks cool and works. I think I did Jason proud. It's been an honor building it, and I just hope that Jeni and her family can remember Jason through it and go out and live life with a piece of him going forward. So next up, we're gonna push this thing back inside. I'm gonna get the MAP crew and all of Jason's friends together, and we're gonna give this thing its first startup. So first startup went really well. It started on the very first try, no issues. So we got it back outside. We're gonna take it out for a test drive. I was surprised that it started first try. With the amount of stuff that was unplugged and plugged back in, it was a relief that it started very first try. So that pretty much wraps up this episode. Coming up next, we're gonna get some street miles in and get the engine broke in. Then we're gonna put it on the dyno and start tuning.